Um, so today, yeah, I will talk about challenges and opportunities in the digital service. So first of all, observe that this says digital service. I'm not talking about telco services, mobile services, or OTT services. We really chose that word very carefully, talking about digital services. Yeah, I think for today the objective of this, what you're going to see today here is it's not a product, it's not a Huawei product. This is forward-looking stuff. It's really what it is. It's a vision and it's a reference architecture. And the objective really, what I would like to try and get out of this is to see if I can get some feedback from the audience and see if these ideas resonate. And most important of all, of course, what the Open Mobile Alliance can do in this area. Well, the first slide is actually one that I can almost skip because I think both Bob and also Camilo have already alluded to this. Of course, everybody knows the problem statement. Operators having to position or reposition themselves in a world that is increasingly, well, it's increasingly dominated by over-the-top applications and services. So I can go forward very quickly, but there is an interesting observation here, I think. Many people, sometimes you see people dividing the economy up into the real economy, the physical economy, and the digital economy. And the interesting thing, of course, is that, first of all, I think Bob said it, of course there's only one economy. It has maybe some physical transactions and some digital transactions, but there is only one economy. But you can also take the opposite view. You can also say that, well, actually, a division into two, the digital economy and the physical economy, you can actually do it even more, you can build it a little bit more subtlety even. And that's what you see on the right-hand side there. There is, of course, the physical economy in the sense that, you know, products that you buy physically, you're physically in the store, you pay with physical money, notes, bank notes, for example. So that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum is what you could call the purely digital, global digital services. I mean, a Google search is the same, whether you do it in China or in the US or in Holland or wherever else. And that's on the other end of the spectrum. But there is a big area in between. What this slide refers to as the local digital economy. So those are it's digital services. It's a digital economy, but it does have this local flavor to it. I can give you some examples which are actually not on this slide because I live in Spain. I don't live in China. This was made by my colleagues in China, but I actually live in Spain. So, for example, there's one startup that I'm actually involved in myself that does a digital a wallet and with near-field communications. And that is a good example of it's a digital service, it's a digital economy, but it does need the points of sale. You do actually have to go into a shop, so it also has this local and this physical aspect of it, so it's really on the border. Another good example is, I don't know how familiar you are with that, but we have a social network in Spain that's called 20, and it's actually also an operator. It's also a virtual mobile operator, and that's what I think what Bob referred to as a player that is going over the top with itself, right? It's both an operator, it's also an over-the-top player. So that's that middle bit, and that is a very good entry point for operators. Of course, an operator, it might be difficult for an operator to engage from one day to another with Google or with Amazon, but these local services where the entry point is easier. Why? Well, and this is probably also a slide that you've sort of a message that you've seen several times, and hopefully this resonates with the operators. And let's not forget that operators have a lot of assets. Operators have a lot of very valuable, they have a lot of value. You can see some of it here. First of all, you have, within your coverage area, you're ubiquitous. I mean, operators give mobile coverage in places where Wi-Fi doesn't reach very often. Of course, operators do have a limited reach. Most of them are not global, but within your reach, you are ubiquitous. The other thing is that you have a large customer base, and you know your customers. and that is something that a lot of enterprises would die for. I mean, you have an incredible market channel, which is a big asset as well. The third box there is, I guess, yeah, many operators, of course, bigger operators operate in several countries, but usually operators they focus on specific regions, and they tend to be very sensitive to the culture and the particular markets of that region, and that is also an asset. You know your region, you know your markets. And finally, and that's last but not least, very important, is the trust. I think it was also mentioned by Camilo just before. Operators have a trusted relationship with their customers. Usually you have a contract with them. So your relationship with the customer is very different from the relationship that, for example, Google or Facebook has with its customer. To a certain degree, the customer trusts you. Of course, the flip side of that is the customer also expects something from the operator. It expects carrier-grade service, reliability, security, and everything. But it is a very different relationship than many of the over-the-top players have. So there's a lot of assets here that we have to leverage, and we don't have to forget we have them. So yeah, so I mentioned in the beginning these digital services. So what are really the keywords? What are the sort of the pillars for digital services? Well, there's really two pillars. One is virtualization, cloud. Because almost everything now on the internet, everything is now, all digital services are delivered from the cloud. The other big pillar is, and that's also been mentioned before, enablement. Enabling other parties, third parties, to do things with your assets, with your infrastructure. So a couple of keywords, digital services. What are the keywords for digital services? Well, they are mobile. That's one, of course. Mostly they are mobile. They are they're open. They tend to be open. They're interactive. They're social, very often. And last but not least, they rely on analytics. It's important that you actually know your customer. You have to know your user. You have to know what they're doing, not only statically but even dynamically. You have to know, where to a certain degree where the user is going, or is likely to go, what they want, what the preferences are, etc. So analytics are an important thing. And also an important aspect is many of those services are on demand. So rather than you pushing a service to a user, it's really the user that has to say, I want this, right? So it's almost taking things the other way around. So that's some characteristics, some keywords for what you could call a digital service. So that's in the box on the right. So and then of course the real big question is how do we enable those digital services? Well, for that we're going to need a new forward-looking IT infrastructure for operators. So that's what this particular vision and reference architecture is about. It's about an enabling IT infrastructure for operators that will enable you to do those digital services. And well, the basic requirements on such an infrastructure is it has to be simple. Of course, it has to be as simple as possible. Second, it has to be convergent. And that is also what Bob talked about earlier. You do not want to have a different architecture for an operator's IT system and for an OTT IT system. It has to be convergent. It has to be based on the same cloud technologies. And third, it has to be inclusive. Inclusive in the sense that it has to, and that is also something that previous speakers have said, that you have to offer your capabilities to third parties. You should not shut them out. You shouldn't treat them as competitors. You should actually include them. So, so the way to actually well, the vision that at least at Huawei we have for enabling this IT infrastructure is something called the Digital Open Cloud, DO Cloud. It's the thing you see there. You see there in the middle. And yeah, it's based on really two big two big pillars that I mentioned before. It's based on the one hand on cloud. It's based on the other hand on enablement. Enabling services from an infrastructure point of view. Now actually the more interesting picture, this is a bit of a full picture, but the more interesting one is this. It's also the last one. And this is sort of, this is really kind of how we envisage that. So here you see the main components of what such a digital open cloud platform would look like. So and actually the interesting thing is if you look at this, you'll recognize a lot of things that already exist. So let me go through them very quickly. You have first of all, you have the digital service suite. So that is actually the enablement part of the architecture. And of course that's you could regard that as an evolution of today's SDPs, today's service development, service deployment platforms. You have a business enablement suite on the right-hand side. That is the whole business management part, and of course that is an evolution of the BSS and OSS we already have. So that is also, that doesn't fall from the sky, it's something that we have already. And then in the middle bit you have this analytics and orchestration thing. Well, orchestration is nothing new either, but probably the analytics thing is a bit newer for operators. That's something that usually we think of, Google doing that or Facebook. But I think operators should start doing that as well. And so that's the middle bit there. Now the interesting thing, of course, and that's the interesting thing for this particular workshop is how does this tie in with OMA? What can OMA do here? Well, if you look at the digital service suite, that's the enablement part, there's a very, very clear role for OMA enablers there. On the one hand, you have the OMA enablers that, we have enablers, for example, for charging, for permission management, device management, things like that. So those things the digital service suite can build on those enablers. But most important of all, to provide your services to third parties, you need APIs. So what is really of key importance here are the APIs, the open APIs that OMA has been working on. There's quite a lot of them already, and we see that as really key enablement technology here. So, so I think that's very positive that OMA is doing still so much work on that, because that clearly has a role here. And yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think we want to leave some time for the round table, so thank you.